Obviously my main interests are weight loss, obesity, and nutrition. But, on Instagram we get into other things too. Right now the world is going through an unbelievable pandemic that just seems to be getting worse. Thankfully, we've got vaccines coming up. And I do want to talk to all the vaccine issues that are out there. Look, there's a lot of people, I'm not going to change their mind. With anti-vaxxers, there is absolutely no scientific study, nothing I could do to change your mind. And I really would say, no matter what it is in life, always be open to changing your mind. I am always open to changing my mind. I think I've changed my mind quite a bit over the years. On many different topics. To me, it's just a sign of really a lack of intellectual curiosity and really an anti-intellectual stance to be like, this is my view. I'm only going to surround myself with people with that view, and I'm not going to listen to any other topic. Because when I talk to anti-vaxxers, it doesn't matter what I tell them. This is a globalist attempt to cull the population, et cetera, or this is a pharma thing. You got to understand from a pharma thing, if this vaccine fails, Pfizer is going to die. Maybe not die off, but it will be a huge loss. They are financially extraordinarily invested in making sure this works. It's not a pharma thing. And this idea that doctors are getting paid to give vaccines, ridiculous. We don't get a penny. I don't get a penny from pharma, and I don't get a penny from, it's illegal for me to even get a pen. I mean, a lot of these people are like, don't get the vaccine, but take this herb. Now, the herb, that has no studies on it, and there are people that produce it, that the herb isn't even in the production of the stuff that they're giving because it's not, it doesn't have any oversight. And so all these things are just really ridiculous. In fact, I went to get my vaccine on Friday because I'm considered a 1A or frontline worker, and there was a line a mile long with some of the smartest people I know in life lined up to get the vaccine. So I got to go and get it tomorrow because there were too many people getting it. And if doctors were only telling people to get it because they're getting paid to do it, they wouldn't get it themselves. But quite the opposite, they're begging to get it. So while anti-vaxxers are like, I don't want it, the doctors are like, please give it to me. And there's several reasons for that. I mean, for a lot of people, I understand. If you can't see this virus up front, if you don't see people dying on a ward struggling for breath, or like I had to operate on a guy who tore part of his diaphragm from coughing so much, you don't see that. There's no tangibility to this disease. And all you get is what you get on media. And if you've seen Social Dilemma, if you surround yourself with conspiracy theorists, that's all you're going to get. And that's just going to put you in an echo chamber, and that's all you're going to hear. Now, could there be a complication with the vaccine? Yes, there could be a complication with the vaccine. Could there be a complication from taking Tylenol? Yes. Could you die when you get in your car today? Yes, we take risks every day. It's a little bit harder, I understand, for the lay public, because every time I sit down with a person, I have to discuss with them an intervention, whether it's medicines or whether it's surgeries or even if it's diets, where I've got to discuss the possible risks. And if I'm discussing the possible risks, I've got to weigh risks and benefits. In this situation, when we're talking about vaccines, we're looking at risks versus benefits. We know that the minor risks, there will be some allergic reactions. Some people feel sick after getting the vaccine. I'm sometimes bothered when I don't feel at least a little bit of something after I get the vaccine because I want my immune system to react to it. This vaccine is interesting. It's one specific protein that it's coding for. So, for instance, there was a SARS swine flu vaccine, but it was an attenuated virus. So you're getting multiple proteins that you're developing an immune response to. And one of those proteins in some people also triggered an autoimmune response where they got narcolepsy. And that vaccine was taken off the market, but those people got narcolepsy. That is a real side effect of a disease that they got from the vaccine. Now, how many got it? Extremely low amounts, but they stopped the vaccine immediately. Could it be that this one specific spike protein is the same as a human protein and we develop an autoimmune response? And the answer is yes, it's possible. What are the chances of that? Extremely small, because we are talking about one tiny little protein. That's the beauty of this vaccine. And this mRNA technology, which was not created overnight, they've been working on it for many, many years, is beautiful because the information never actually enters into the nucleus. It doesn't change our own cellular DNA. It just uses the cell's production company to create one specific protein that we develop an immune system to. So I'm really excited about the vaccine. I think it is ingenuity at its finest. I see a lot of people say, what about just being naturally healthy? Of course you want to be naturally healthy. There's no question. There's a few people I know that are healthier than me as far as diets and exercise and everything I do to try to be healthy. I still have gotten the flu. The one time I didn't get the flu vaccine, I got sick as hell from it. Now, a lot of times the sickness that comes from these infections can be from a very healthy immune system, where your immune system heavily reacts to the infection. And when it heavily reacts to the infection, that's when you get this, what they call cytokine storm, where you get extremely sick from it. So that's a healthy immune system that's causing that, not a sick immune system. That cytokine storm eventually does clear out the bacteria. The whole point of it is to fight the bacteria, so a healthy person is unlikely to die from the infection, but they can get really sick from it. I've known many healthy people that get sick from it. Of course, the big risk is that you're going to take this disease and you're going to give it to someone who really can't fight the virus, and they're going to get really sick. You always hear this term herd immunity, and people don't understand what that is. But what herd immunity is this: the vaccine works about 94 to 95% effectiveness, meaning there's 4 to 5% of people that will not generate the antibody to this protein. So they get the vaccine, but they are not immune to COVID. They are therefore dependent now on the rest of the population being vaccinated and developing an immune response so that they don't get it, so that the bacteria has, or virus in this situation, has nowhere to go and it can't grow anymore. And so if they're hanging out with their family, if all their family got vaccinated and all their family is immune, then they don't have to worry about the fact that they're not immune. And so herd immunity comes when there's a whole bunch of people that are now immune. The problem, of course, is that to get herd immunity without a vaccine would take, the figures are all over the place, but something like 20 to 30 million people dying in order for the world to get an adequate herd immunity. That's not a number I want to see, 20 to 30 million people dying. So this vaccine looks great. There will always be risks with everything we do in medicine, with everything we do in life, but they've gone to quite a bit of effort to create what I think is a fairly safe vaccine. What about the potential side effects? If Pfizer does mess up on this, yes, they will be ruined, but people may also be physically harmed. I had COVID in November. It's a terrible thing, but I'm not running. Now, first of all, it's very important that just because you got COVID and it was terrible, but you got over it, you think, hey, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to you, but if you come to our COVID ward, you will see that it could be much worse than what you had. It's really important never to extrapolate your individual experience onto a whole population. There's some people that obviously have a much worse infection and are much sicker. It varies all over the place. There were identical twins where one twin got sick but recovered and the other one did not. And so there are going to be differences. Possible side effects. I mean, there's the common side effects, a little bit of fever, a little bit of chills, pain in the arm, these kind of minor things. We have not seen any major side effects except for 2 people that got an extreme allergic reaction. There's some people that they paused for some numbness and tingling. Look, when you're trying to vaccinate millions of people, there are going to be complaints. Some of them, those complaints are going to have nothing to do with the vaccine at all. You may have seen that nurse that fainted, and everybody was like, oh my God, that nurse fainted, therefore that's from the vaccine. That's not from the vaccine. That's called a vasovagal response. We see that all the time. If I stick a needle in someone, I draw blood from them, or I vaccinate them, and then I put TV screens on them, they faint. We see people faint all the time. I saw that and didn't think twice. I didn't know that people were going to be like, oh, this is an example that the vaccine doesn't work. I should have known better. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there are risks, but I think right now all that we've seen are just minor local responses, and we don't know of any major side effects yet. How has medicine changed since COVID? Are you doing things differently all around you? Yeah, oh boy, things have changed like crazy. There's been a lot that's happened. I mean, obviously, one thing that really gets me is that medicine, there's a lot of this, like, to create a physician-patient relationship. Like, I really like to create a deep physician-patient relationship, and a lot of that has to do with touch. I love hugging my patients. I think it's important to shake hands when you first meet someone. That initial touch is a bond. And in medicine, we just don't do it anymore. I walk into my exam room, I give the person the elbow salute. I still examine them, but I do it very gingerly, constantly washing my hands that I did before, but now even more. We have to wear a mask all the time, which is a problem because I try to be expressive when I talk. I think there's a lot of facial expressions and emotional connection with people that happens through facial expression. That's blocked off. But we have to wear masks all the time. Our hospital is starting to get packed up with COVID because we're getting that Thanksgiving bump, which is really scary to me. We may have to stop doing elective procedures, including elective surgeries. Now, again, to the conspiracy theorists who think that hospitals are making money off of COVID, there is nothing worse than me not being in the operating room. They make money off me and my colleagues. Where we do surgeries, patients do well and they go home quickly. That's where they make money. It's not when they have someone taking up a bed for multiple days and staying sick. That is a huge drain on resources and nobody wants that. The hospital does get a Medicare, a little bit over the Medicare usual reimbursement rate for COVID patients, but the hospital doesn't decide who gets hospitalized. We do as doctors, and we're not going to hospitalize anybody that doesn't need to be hospitalized. That's one of the stupidest of all the conspiracy theories. Other things that have happened, we have constant meetings where we're talking about COVID, where we're looking over the science, really large hospital-wide meetings with all the doctors where we have specialists that are reviewing the latest vaccines, the latest research, and we review it all. So there's been a lot of coming together as a hospital community, a lot of the kind of personal touches that are lost. And the worst to me is the COVID unit, because in the COVID unit, those poor people, like when I go and see a patient in the COVID unit, I'm in and I'm out so fast. I'm like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Okay, I'm out of here. That's so sad, right? They're in there alone with a disease that's scary. They're struggling to breathe, and it just breaks my heart that I can't reach out and give them the usual kind of care that we do as medical professionals. Vaccine effective for all the mutations of the virus? We don't know that yet. I should say at some point we should probably get to other questions too. I'm studying this stuff because it's interesting to me and because I treat people and I want to make sure that they get the right health advice, but I am not a vaccine expert. The spike protein that the vaccine codes for, I understand, is in all the mutations that have been seen so far. As you might have heard on the news, there's a new mutation of COVID virus that is even more infective than other viruses, they believe. I don't know that they've done a gene mapping, RNA mapping on it to see if it codes for the specific spike protein, but I believe that it does from what I've heard from other people. I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see, but so far I think it does. The proof's gonna be in the pudding. Are we immune next year to this is gonna be the real question. Oils, including olive oil, and that contribute to CVD risk. This is one place where I've changed, actually. So we talked about being open to change. When I first really got into nutrition years ago, I was pretty sick. I mean, I had sky-high cholesterol, sky-high triglycerides, fatty liver. And as I started researching stuff, I decided that oils were as bad as anything. I still have some issues with oils. I don't like the heating of oils and the oxidation of oils, because an oxidized oil is a real problem, especially oxidation of LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, which can really cause the heart disease and atherosclerosis, the calcification of vessels. But we are now seeing that is more a saturated fat issue than a vegetable oil issue. And when you look at large epidemiologic studies, things like olive oil and even canola oil, which I used to think was the devil, doesn't seem to really contribute to a heart disease. Again, these are epidemiologic studies. We don't have any very good randomized controlled trial studies. They certainly in trials do not increase LDL cholesterol to the degree that saturated fat does. So I've loosened up a bit on oils. Obviously, with the Mediterranean diet, there's a lot of olive oils, and it's a pretty good diet. I have not seen any very good trials looking at a plant-based diet with oils versus without. I don't use a lot of oil because oil is very concentrated calories, and I'm dealing mainly with obesity, not with heart disease. And so from an obesity standpoint, I don't want a lot of oil, and because I don't want a lot of calories, I want to limit calories. So I don't use a lot of oil myself. I certainly don't recommend it for my patients that are trying to lose weight, but I don't think that vegetable oils are quite the venom that I used to think they were. Suggestions for vegans with Gerd. Yeah, so Gerd is an interesting problem. What Gerd is gastroesophageal reflux disease, and there is a response to foods that we eat. So we have an esophagus that carries the food from the mouth all the way down to the stomach. The stomach, the end of the esophagus going into the stomach should be below the diaphragm. And there's a muscle there, and that muscle is called the lower esophageal sphincter. And that sphincter is supposed to close up and prevent acid from going back up into the esophagus. We know that certain foods do cause that sphincter to open up. We know that saturated fats do that. So a real fatty meal will do that. We know that caffeine will do that. We know that nicotine will do that. We know that alcohol will do that. It does not appear that citrus foods will do that. However, citrus foods, if they do go back up there, if you have an incompetent muscle, then you will get an acidic effect into your esophagus and you'll feel it. A plant-based diet actually has been shown in studies to work with reflux, but it's not going to work with everybody. So you can be vegan and get reflux disease. You could be vegan and get heart disease. You could be vegan and get cancer, all right? So that's another thing I want to caution about, is this idea that veganism will cure everything, because it just simply won't cure everything. But it's a lot better than a standard American diet in these situations, and it has been shown to help. With reflux and heartburn, there are some things you could do if you're getting reflux. Obviously, avoid the things that really cause the problem. Saturated fat, eating too much at one time, which causes pressure, controlling your weight, because weight is a big factor with reflux, because the pressure of fat inside your belly can push weight up. Not smoking, not drinking, not lying down for at least 2 hours after you eat, to give your food some time to use gravity and get out of the stomach so it's not refluxing back up. For some of our patients, we have them elevate the head of the bed. Now, when I say elevate the head of the bed, that's not propping a whole bunch of pillows behind yourself, because that kind of kinks your body into an L, and that actually increases pressure and could actually drive the reflux up just as much as laying down. So we're actually talking about putting books at the head of the bed so the bed elevates like that, but you're not kinking like that, increasing intra-abdominal pressure. If that continues to be a problem, then it's time to go and talk to the gastroenterologist. There are medications that can help. There are surgeries that can help. I do a surgery called a Nissen fundoplication. On all patients, I would want to do a scope if you're still getting problems, to see just how bad the reflux is. We've had a huge increase in reflux in America over the past 50 years. That increase has also increased the rate of esophageal cancer that we're seeing, and that this is esophageal cancer specifically due to reflux. And so in some situations, if you've got really bad reflux, then some of these surgeries are a good idea. And we do several surgeries to treat reflux, but that's a whole nother topic. Because of COVID, everyone is taking vitamin D. In Israel, the government wants to manufacture and fortify dairy milks and milk substitutes of vitamin D. Could it lead to oversupply, and is it dangerous? Yes, it can lead to oversupply. Well, there have been studies showing that there are people that could get too much vitamin D. I check vitamin D pretty regularly in my patients. There's a couple times I've seen too much vitamin D, but these are in patients taking extremely high dose vitamin D. Here's the thing with vitamin D. It has been shown to be important in COVID in correlation studies. Again, with correlation, we don't know, is it the vitamin D or is it something else that the patient's doing that also has vitamin D going with it? Like someone who's like, oh, I'm going to be really healthy all the time and I take vitamin D to be healthier, or I go outside and run all the time. Is that it, or is it the vitamin D? We don't know. But from correlation studies, vitamin D does seem to have an effect on how not necessarily whether you get it, but how sick you get. However, we don't know for sure. And with some of these other things you hear about, if you've got a normal vitamin D level, you don't need to over supplement. That you don't need to do, over supplement. I really don't like over supplementation. Probably a good idea to get your vitamin levels checked, because if you've got a normal vitamin D, taking extra vitamin D is not that great idea. I mean, there's going to be some supplemented vitamin D in milks and things like that, but in plant-based milks too. Is that really going to drive your vitamin D level up that much? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to get poisoned unless you're drinking just gallons of plant-based milk or regular milk, but that's not going to do it. It's more these supplements that are 5,000 to 50,000 units. You could go over on vitamin D. Now, vitamin D toxicity really is nothing severe that we've seen so far, but it does concern me. In some of the long-term studies, there's not a huge advantage to vitamin D. There's some studies that show an advantage. For me to give someone vitamin D, or for me to take it myself, it takes a very low vitamin D level, and I look at something called parathyroid hormone. So I want to know, so vitamin D controls calcium uptake. You can't just look at calcium levels in the blood, because the body's really good at keeping calcium levels normal. If your calcium level drops, your body will just go to the bone and start taking out calcium out of the bone to keep the serum calcium elevated. So if I check the serum calcium, it's always normal. But what I want to know is it normal because the body's eating its own bone? And that's how the way I know that is from something called parathyroid hormone. So I don't just look at vitamin D, I look at the vitamin D's function through parathyroid hormone to see whether or not they're really low. So with all supplements, and my dream is to create a supplement. I've looked into this a bit because I was like, I don't want to just take a multivitamin. I don't like taking all these things if I don't need them. I want to know what I need, and that's what I want to take. And so I would love to have a company, and I'm working on it, where it's an easy lab to check every single vitamin, and then it gives me the exact vitamin that myself needs, and then you get a vitamin that's everything you need. That would be an ideal world. But yeah, I mean, I think vitamin D has a role. I can't believe how many people are vitamin D deficient. But if you're not vitamin D deficient, you don't need to take vitamin D, if that makes sense. Would I ever debate Avi Bittman? He disagrees with you on the stance that vegan bone fracture study. He thinks it's a bad study. Look, I would debate Avi. I would debate anybody on any of the topics I believe in, but I don't disagree with Avi that was a bad study. It wasn't a bad study. It was as good as they could do with the data that they have. Now, I use that EPIC data to talk about the benefits of a vegan diet. So if I'm going to use that EPIC database to discuss the benefits of a vegan diet, I better be prepared to also tolerate the possible negatives that it shows of a vegan diet. As I discussed when I talked about that EPIC data trial, they looked at multiple different things that they controlled for between the vegan group and the non-vegan group. The vegan group had a lower bone mineral density and some more fractures. And I was extrapolating reasons that could be the case. It could be because of K2. We know in separate studies that K2 does have an effect on actually taking the calcium and putting it into the bone. I can't say that for sure. In vegans, it's a K2 deficiency. I know we don't get a lot of K2 in our diet, and that may be an explanation for the study, but another explanation may be that the meat eaters were using more estrogen. That's probably a more likely situation because estrogen definitely, a postmenopausal woman taking estrogen is going to have stronger bones than a postmenopausal woman not taking bones. So there's a lot of things you can come in these correlation studies and say, well, that's a confounder, that's a confounder. I thought they did a pretty good job trying to control for confounders in this study. Controlling for weight, things like that. So I don't disagree with that. It's not a perfect study. A perfect study is a randomized controlled trial done over many years where we got one group that's vegan, one group isn't, and everything else is exactly the same. We're not going to be able to do that study. So we got to take the available data and we got to take the good with the bad. We got to understand that we could say that study's nonsense, don't worry about it. I don't like to do that. That study had a significant finding. The study may be bad, it may, or not bad, the study may have drawn this conclusion erroneously, but it may have drawn the conclusion correctly, and we need to take it into account. 3 months ago, I started a whole food plant-based diet with no oil. After a week, I felt great. I have not lost any weight. Now I feel lethargic and unmotivated. Any ideas? Okay, so a few things. I see this all the time. People start a vegan diet. So what's a vegan diet? I don't know. I mean, I know what it doesn't have in it. I don't know what it has in it. I mean, there are people that tell me they're on a vegan diet. They're eating nothing but Beyond Burgers and fries. I'll see other people go to other extreme. They're like, I'm not going to add any oil or anything. I'm just going to eat nothing but fruit. and nothing but vegetables. Now, there's people that are very successful on a fruitarian diet or raw diet, but they're eating all the time and they're really watching their diet very carefully. For someone to just start that right away, they're just not getting enough calories. If you're not getting enough calories in your diet, you're gonna feel lethargic. The other thing that may be happening in there is it might be a vitamin deficiency. So you may not be supplementing B12 and you may be B12 deficient. That would be an important aspect. The thing I find in a plant-based diet that's really effective in my patients so that they don't feel lethargic is to concentrate on starches. I find starches to be the most satiating, not I find, they are in studies. I mean, they've done studies where they fed people foods to find out what's the most satiating food you could eat. And potatoes were the most satiating food you could eat. I find diets without potatoes and beans and rice and things like that to actually be, make it really hard for people to stick with the diet. Some people can, but with the vast majority of people that I work with, it just doesn't seem to work very well. A vegan in my PhD program for public policy, looking for dissertation topics. Do I have any ideas for policy topics that need to be changed? Oh gosh, so many. Policy topics that need to be changed, so many. I mean, when you look at the fact that the USDA will come out and they were going to come out with a recommendation of what foods we should be eating. And their recommendations are not terrible. It's eat a predominantly plant-based diet. 3/4 of the plate that they show us are fruits, vegetables. In the protein section that they put there is, it says protein, but now they include plant-based proteins. So it's a fruit, vegetable, plant-based protein, a little bit of meat diet. Our spending for food subsidizing for industry is almost entirely towards the meat and dairy industry. When it is towards plants, it's going towards plants that go and feed the meat and dairy industry. So we don't put our money where our mouth is. We tell people this is what you should be eating, and then our farm bills don't support that fact. And you know, that's very concerning to me. We need to be really putting our money where our mouth is. Obviously, if any of you follow me, you know I'm a believer in single healthcare model, a Medicare for all type model. I mean, you could have private industry. I shouldn't say a one model. You can have private industry, but that everybody in the country should have access to a public option. And in that public option, I think we start working with doctors and hospital systems on what's called value-based medicine. And so that's what I would tell you to really look at, value-based medicine. In other words, for instance, at my hospital at Mission, we cover a certain amount of people. So Blue Cross Blue Shield says, you have 300,000 patients of ours in the system. For each patient, we're going to give you this amount of money. With that amount of money, that's all the money you get. So if you take someone and you put them on 50 medications and never take them off, those medications come out of your pocket. If you go and do a whole bunch of studies on them and a whole bunch of surgeries, that comes out of your pocket. If you keep them so healthy that they don't need any of these things, then keep whatever's left over. And well, that's fantastic. So I think that value-based care model may be a real big factor in the future. Low platelet levels, usually only associated with low iron. What are some causes of low platelet level? There's many causes of low platelet levels. First of all, you may not even have low platelet levels. So there's some people that have these certain antibodies where their platelets clump. So on a slide, it's read as 1 platelet, but it's really 2. You got to get that checked out. There's multiple medications that could cause low platelets. So you got to check with the hematologist if one of the medications you're on is causing low platelets. There are diseases of the spleen, enlarged spleens that can trap platelets. Liver disease can cause problems with the spleen that causes problems with platelets. If you're having platelet issues with low platelet and low iron, you ought to see a hematologist and get that checked. All right, Jennifer, come on. We're trying to add people to the screen, so let's have a conversation. Hey, Jen.
I know. We got to make sure this is going to work. She might not know. Let's see if her audio works.
Okay, Jen, does your audio work? Can you talk?
Hello.
Oh, wow.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing? So Instagram, you're not going to be able to see this, but if you're on Facebook or YouTube or StreamYard, you'll be able to go in. And again, on Instagram, my links are in my bio and stuff. Okay, Jen, what do you got?
I'm just enjoying it. I didn't have a particular question.
Okay.
I did make a comment on the nutrient testing you were talking about, there's the availability through functional medicine. That's what I do. I'm a health and wellness coach. Same passions with working with obesity through diet and exercise. But anyway, there are tests. I do blood tests. We do urine, and we get all that information. It's pretty cool.
What company do you use?
Vibrant America.
So I've been looking at Genova, who does the same thing.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that's what we do, a great micronutrient test.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do a combination of that and stool and kind of with every patient, even though unfortunately insurance doesn't cover it, that's what we're doing is looking at, how does your unique body work? What do you need? And you have to look at everything, like you said, the parathyroid, and it's all connected. So that's why I love functional medicine. I mean, it's a part of the puzzle, but I think it's important to know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. It's part of the Western medicine I think has been missing. Has been now on the Western medicine side, they say, well, a lot of this functional medicine, we don't have any studies proving that this works, and they're right about a lot of that. But you take something like vitamin D, and we are seeing vitamin D toxicity. We ought to know specifically, do you need vitamin D, and not just from a vitamin D level. So yeah, I think that's pretty important. But yeah, I'm going to be working on that. So thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for joining in. So that's pretty cool that we have that function. We'll be using that more in the future, especially when we have guests, so you could come on and talk with us or debate us if you want. I always like a good debate. Okay, someone's saying here that their platelets are 142,000 and they're seeing a doctor next week, and they're worried they're going to say it's because you're vegan. No, that is definitely not because you're vegan. I mean, I've heard people say, doctors say it's because they're vegan, which is kind of funny because that doctor probably saw a whole bunch of other people with the same platelet level that weren't vegan before that. I mean, vegan people are going to get sick, just like we all do. And they're going to get sick less, but they're going to get these problems. And just because they got it doesn't mean it's because they're vegan, because the meat eaters get it too. What are my thoughts on supplementing creatine, carnitine, taurine, and choline? Okay, that's an interesting one. Let me start with the latter. So carnitine, taurine, and choline, your body actually creates that themselves. So those are non-essential. You can basically create that with existing amino acids. Choline is easily found in chickpeas. Obviously, if you're eating eggs, I take it you're talking about a vegan. If you're not vegan, you're eating eggs, you'll get plenty of these things. But if you're a vegan, you may be getting a little bit low on carnitine and taurine, not so much on choline. You get plenty on choline. Carnitine and taurine, your body makes it pretty easily. There have been some studies showing vegans are low on it, but without any real detriment. So they haven't been able to show that that really creates any kind of detriment. And you got to remember, the body creates taurine intracellular. So your serum taurine might be low, but that doesn't mean your actual body cells are low in taurine. Creatine is interesting. Creatine, basically, you're getting that from meat and dairy and eggs. And so a vegan may not get creatine. Now, is that going to affect a vegan long-term health? No, we really don't think so. And again, long-term studies on vegans is they're very healthy. But there have been some studies showing that vegans that take creatine get even a stronger response than meat eaters. And so what creatine is used for is probably the most studied supplement out there. And bodybuilders use it like crazy because it gives them energy. Creatine is another pathway for energy, and it gives them energy, especially in very quick anaerobic type movements that are not depending on aerobic metabolism for energy. And so a lot of athletes use creatine. It's used a lot by bodybuilders. It doesn't really make your muscles bigger. It makes you able to do that extra rep that gets you bigger or stronger. Interestingly, there have been some studies showing that vegans that supplement with creatine have a subjective improvement in cognitive function. I've dabbled with creatine. I didn't notice anything. There are some people that don't have the genetics to actually utilize creatine properly and don't get the response from it. Maybe I'm one of those people, but I have heard vegans that have taken creatine and have a huge response, especially athletes. it looks to be, after more studies than any supplement you've ever seen, looks to be extremely safe. If you use it, you're supposed to load with it, which I've never done, which is to take 20 milligrams a day for a week and then just go to 5 milligrams a day to saturate your blood, your muscles. I haven't done that before. Maybe that's why I haven't had quite the creatine response. I may try that again in the future. I don't really feel like I need creatine. I get through my workouts just fine, but there you go. I do think creatine is a viable supplement. Does it make any difference if I eat white rice instead of brown rice, if I eat more than enough fruits and vegetables? Look, it probably doesn't. Brown rice has probably a little more, the more we process the rice, the more we process anything, the more you're going to lose fiber and essential nutrients. Like, you don't want polished white rice, because that's really, the polishing is getting off the bran. There have been studies showing, believe it or not, that white rice has less arsenic than brown rice. I eat rice. I don't really worry. Look, there's heavy metals in arsenic. You're never going to escape all the stuff that's in food. There's cadmium on kale. Our bodies are made to deal with some of this stuff. The more healthy you are, the better you're going to deal with it. So I don't worry too much about rice. I eat rice fairly regularly. I like long grain, uncut basmati rice. It's very natural. Rice that comes from Asia and India tends to have less arsenic in it, but I don't go crazy about it. And I eat whatever I feel goes with the meal that I'm eating, if that makes sense. Don't drive yourself crazy over this stuff. What do I say about drinking water with salt for weight loss? I say don't do that. What? I say don't do that. I mean, if your salt and water is in soup, do that. Soup is great for weight loss. There's actually been some good studies on it done by Dr. Barbara Roll. Soup is a great way, especially with kids, to get vegetables in and to get beans in and things like that. And it turns out that the fiber soaked with water tends to fill you up really well. So if your salt water comes in the form of soup, fine. Other than that, no. Unless you want to have really bad diarrhea, because that's what salt water will do for you. Pretty much only cooked vegetables, nearly zero raw foods. Do any, yes, okay. They're asking if micros can get destroyed with cooking. I mean, the cooking definitely can denature some proteins, so you're losing some of the enzymes in raw food. Some cooked food, you absorb micros better, but in some situations, raw foods are going to get you what you need better. I think a good combination of the two is always going to be the best. I mean, a raw apple, you're going to want a raw apple. Eating some raw carrots here and there, having dark green vegetables in a salad with some tomatoes and radishes, you know, that's going to be good stuff, and then eat the rest cooked. Are you going to die if you never eat anything but cooked vegetables? No, you'll do fine. Thoughts on superfoods like Mecca, Ashwagandha, lion's mane. Those are not superfoods per se. They're, you know, different herbs and things that have been used. They have science behind them. I get, you know, you got to be careful with scientists sometimes, all right? They get carried away in their little field and lose the forest for the trees. I really like Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She does a great podcast. She does some interesting stuff, but she could get so into the weeds with like one particular thing, you know, like she is so into the weeds with sulforaphane and thinks that like the broccoli sprouts are the world. They're good, but you got to look at the whole diet. Look at the forest, not the tree. You want to put maca in your diet. If it gives you energy, it gives you energy. I mean, the Incans used it. It was a root vegetable. Great. Ashwagandha probably does help with stress. Do you need to spend a lot of money on ashwagandha? No. I worry about when people take ashwagandha and herbs like that. Again, the herbal industry is not like the pharma industry. It is not looked over at all. Are you even getting ashwagandha when you get it? Are there metals and plastics in the supplement you're getting? These kind of things bother me. So I don't take these supplements. I don't think that I really need them. Lion's mane is a great mushroom, but I want that mushroom in, you know, my mushroom dish that I eat rather than in supplement form. I don't think you really need the supplements. I do think that this becomes somewhere where someone's like, oh, I could sell them. I mean, can you imagine if I didn't have scruples, I could say, oh, I'm drinking this tea and it's got all these different things and I'm telling you this is the greatest tea and I'd make a lot of money. You could make money selling this stuff. It's certainly not necessary to be healthy. I followed the whole food plant-based diet for 3 years. I still get cystic acne every few weeks. What could be causing breakouts? Okay, so there's been a definite association between cystic acne and dairy. There's definitely been a connection with sugar. We don't know the whole mechanism behind that though. Like I can't work out why sugar causes it, but there definitely has been a connection. So you got to look in your sugar intake. Certainly, you know, Oreos are vegan. Are you eating Oreos? There's also stuff that just may not have anything to do with your actual diet. I'm like I said about heart disease, like I said about cancer, like I said about all this stuff. You could be vegan and still get these diseases. You get them at a lower rate than a meat eater does it, but it doesn't mean that you don't get it. And if that's the situation, you need to see a dermatologist because there are solutions to that. There are topical things. This could be a problem with the way you metabolize. I don't know if this is a male or female, but the way you metabolize your estrogen or your testosterone, and there are treatments that can work with that. Bioindividuality is involved in protein synthesis. For example, there's 2 fruitarians on the same diet, lifting program, and get wildly different results. Okay, so wildly different results could be wildly different genetics, all right? Genetics are going to play a big role on the physique that you get and where you carry your muscle and how you get your muscle. You can't downplay genetics. Your ability to utilize different proteins, who utilizes it more, I don't know if I could give you a scientific answer or that I've actually seen the study looking at that. I would assume naturally that people, you know, we're all very different actually. You know, we're all very much the same, but we're also very much different. There will be some individualities with the way we process things. We know there's individualities with the way we process ALA, which is a plant fat. Some people convert it to DHA and EPA more effectively than other people, and that's a genetic component. I don't know with protein that I've ever seen a difference, but it could be. Vegan bone fracture study. Was the methodology used to adjust for fractures like BMI sound? I thought Avi had multiple contentions. I didn't go through all this stuff because I agreed with it. Yeah, the way they controlled for BMI was sound as far as I know, unless Avi knows something different in the methodology. I think what Avi was saying, I don't think he's saying that was not sound. I think he was saying you got to understand that people that are overweight tend to have better bone density. People that eat meat tend to be more overweight. Vegans tend to have a very low weight, so they're not going to have as strong of a bone in general just from the weight issue. When they're trying to control, they're trying to get equal weight people. So they're trying to get meat eaters that are the same weight as plant eaters. But if all the vegans have low weight and all the meat eaters are much higher weight, it's hard to make that control and make it effective in order to get a good study. I think that's what Avi was saying. And in that way, yeah, that was a flaw with the system, but they still did get, you know, vegans and meat eaters matched up from weight. What about vegan nutrition for endurance athletes? Look, endurance athletes thrive on a vegan diet. There are so many good endurance athletes. There have been Olympic champions, marathon runners. There's a marathon fruitarian, Michael Arnstein. A lot of these really good endurance athletes believe that they recover much better with a plant-based diet. I feel that myself. I've done a lot of endurance sports over the past 10, 12 years. What do I do when I train? Not much different. I maybe do a little bit more on the carbohydrate, really starch side, really loading up on potatoes and sweet potatoes. I do up my protein, and if I can't get it in with my meals, I up it using supplements, and I'll use a shake. So you might hear about bioavailability of protein. I hate the bioavailability because people say, oh, plant proteins don't have the amino acids. All plant proteins have all amino acids. They may just not have it in the same amount that meat proteins have it. A lot of the studies on bioavailability of the plants are done in rodents, or they're done with uncooked vegetables, which may have a different absorption pattern. And you also got to remember, when you're making muscle, your body has a labile supply of amino acids in there. We don't store protein, but we're constantly breaking down our muscle and our tissue and recycling, and we could use that. So if we need it, we utilize it. I think the average human being needs about 1 gram per kilogram lean body mass, 1 gram per kilogram of lean body mass in protein. If I am exercising but not really pushing myself to the nth limits, and I don't need to get that extra benefit and be big and gigantic and huge for a show, I go to 1.2 grams per kilogram. I was gonna be an Olympic athlete, I'd probably go to 1.5, maybe 1.6, depending on what that sport is. Endurance, long distance endurance, I'd want 1.6, and in bodybuilding, I'd want 1.6. Based on these things called muscle protein synthesis studies. You can't always trust muscle protein synthesis as a kind of a complex science, because muscle protein synthesis isn't taking into account muscle protein breakdown, which is where we believe a plant-based diet does such a good job, because again, plant-based diets do have a different amino acid profile, but part of their amino acid profile that's lacking or is lower is we're lower in some of the more acidic amino acids. So the idea being is that if we have a more alkaline type diet, I hate saying the term alkaline diet because it gets misconstrued and people start drinking high pH water, which is not necessary. But if you're eating amino acids that don't have as much sulfa on them, so they're not as acidic, you tend then not to have to buffer as much. A lot of the buffering comes from taking calcium from the muscles. A lot of this is theory. It is not absolute proof, but this is the idea. How much whiskey can I drink and not cause too much damage? Gosh, who knows the answer to that? I mean, the general thinking nowadays, you'll see it stated that as a woman can have 1 drink a night and a male can have 2 drinks a night. As far as bioindividuality, this is a definite topic where it is very different from person to person. Some people could process it better than others. I don't think there's anything healthy about drinking alcohol. I don't think there's anything healthy about it. But at the same time, if you enjoy a glass of whiskey, will one kill you? Probably not. I would limit it to what you need in order to be happy. Well, gosh, I shouldn't say that because, again, bioindividuality for some people, well, in order to be happy, I need to be drunk off my ass every day because the world's depressing. Just remember, this is not a health food. This is something that could potentially be harmful. It needs to be taken in low doses, but I can't give you the exact dose. I had a glass of whiskey last night. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is completely unnecessary unless you have an open wound that is not healing well. It does drive oxygen into an open wound, especially like a foot where you get bad blood supply. So if you've got bad blood supply to an area, it's great to get some hyperbaric oxygen. I don't know any connection between jaundice and scoliosis. I'm sorry, don't know what that is. You may have scoliosis and jaundice and they're completely unrelated, but now jaundice, obviously there's a lot of issues with jaundice. If you're jaundiced, you better get that looked at. Jaundice is an issue. There's multiple things that could cause jaundice, from hepatitis to bile duct blockages to gallbladder stones, but you ought to get that checked out. Don't be jaundiced. Watching a documentary on Amazon called Fat Fiction, which promotes saturated fat, including animal fats. You can find a documentary in Amazon to support just about anything. Saturated fat, this should be a done deal by now. I posted today a review that a plant-based physician did on all the plant-based literature of the year. She included one that's not really a plant-based study, but it was really good, what's called Cochrane review of saturated fat. Now you gotta understand, what the Cochrane review aims to do is take all of the research about a topic, review the research for how good the actual study is, was its methodology adequate, and then ask the question, does it answer the question at hand, and then state what that answer is. And they state that there's no question that saturated fat contributes to heart disease, possibly cancer, and is not a good part of the diet. I don't know how anybody could say look, from a health standpoint, again, when we're talking about veganism, it's not, you're not vegan for your health. All right? You're vegan because you're worried about the way we treat animals for food, which is my situation. The idea that right now, as we speak, pigs are being tortured, stuck together in these disgusting, filth-ridden, disease-infested places so that I could have a piece of bacon disgusts me. And I never want to give $1 towards that. That's why I'm vegan. I don't want that to happen to these cute cows. I don't like the idea that we basically rape them so that they have to have children that we then take away from the mother so that we could get her milk. farming is disgusting. That's why I don't eat meat. If you eat a little meat, can you still be healthy? Yes, you can still be healthy. If you're eating seafood or game food, you're definitely going to get some vitamin and nutrients that I supplement. And so there's a role for that on a health basis. There's no role for what we do to oceans in order to get fish. It's horrible. It's horrible for the environment. We're destroying our world. That's why you're vegan. So the question is, can you be vegan and healthy? No question. No question you can. There's tons of research on that. So look, I mean, look, it's somewhat hypocritical for me to criticize documentaries when I've been on a few documentaries about plant-based diets, but documentaries is someone trying to create a story, and they're going to cherry pick whatever they can to put that in there. So you could say What the Health cherry picked. You could say Game Changers cherry picked. I could argue with you on a lot of that because they were pretty extensive, but I wouldn't go to documentaries for your source of information. And that documentary was a huge, big time attempt to control minds. How much protein do women need? So the typical woman needs about 46 grams of protein a day. Again, I would probably just stick with those grams per kilogram. I think healthy is between 0.8 and 1 gram per kilogram per day. Again, that number, we are different in our protein needs. The 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram, I say that so that if I'm speaking to a huge population, no one eating that is going to not get enough protein. But there's some people that don't need that much protein, but that's the safe number, 0.8 grams per kilogram to 1 gram per kilogram, go up to 1.2 to 1.4 for athletics. And again, it's grams per kilogram lean body mass. In other words, I'm about 180 pounds, but lean, taking away my 13% body fat or so, now I'm looking at roughly the 160s. Roughly I'm a 70 to 75 kilogram guy. I probably need about 90 grams of protein a day in order to really do my athletic endeavors, which I usually get fairly easily with my tofu and my beans and my nuts. Hard not to take B12 on the same day you eat sea vegetables. Is there?
They heard
that. Yeah. No, I don't think that's a problem at all. I don't think that's an issue.
Right.
Is eating tofu daily healthy? Yes, better be. I eat tofu pretty much daily. I love tofu. Like if you say tofu doesn't taste good, you just don't know how to prepare tofu, which is, again, hypocritical of me to say because I probably don't prepare my own tofu. My wife does. I eat a lot of tofu. Tofu's got a lot of benefits to it. The phytoestrogens are extremely good for you, the isoflavones. It's got a very good effect on cholesterol, which is a big worry with me. I always want to get my cholesterol level down. It's a great source of protein. It's a very complete protein. Of course, with complete proteins, the other thing I worry about is that in our lives, we stimulate IGF-1 and mTOR too much. What do those letters mean? IGF-1 is a hormone that is great for building muscle, but it is not good for cancer. mTOR is basically the aging pathway. You do want to stimulate mTOR because it does build muscle. Notice that muscle building and longevity may be at odds with each other, but there's a happy medium because if you don't have muscle, that's not good either. It's called sarcopenia, so low muscle is also associated with poor longevity. So you want enough muscle, you don't want too much muscle, you don't want to constantly be getting IGF-1 and mTOR. And so I like soy because it does stimulate IGF-1 to build my muscles, but at the same time it stimulates IGF-1 binding protein, so I'm not getting this huge effect of IGF-1. And I also try to, put my main proteins after my workout, so my tofu dinner is after my evening workout. Everyone in the world with type 2 diabetes ate a high carb, less than 20% fat, whole food plus diet. What percentage of them do you think would no longer be diabetic? Gosh, that's a good question. A large percentage would not. I do feel that diabetes is a very diet-oriented disease. And it's not a diet-oriented disease, a diet of carbs. It's not. Everybody, doctors think that diabetes is carb-related. You just hear it so much. It's so much in the vernacular. If you don't study it, you don't get it. What type 2 diabetes, it's not about the blood sugar number. It's about how your body is processing that blood sugar. Now, if your body can't process the blood sugar, and the blood sugar goes high, that's got negative effects. Because then the high sugars bind with your antibodies so that they become ineffective, so you're immunosuppressed. It binds with your blood vessels, it could bind with things in your eye to cause damage, so you don't want high sugars. But the problem isn't the high sugar. It's not that the people are like, I've got diabetes, if I eat an apple, my blood sugar goes up, so I can't eat an apple because that's causing diabetes. That's the wrong way to look at it. We are made to process carbohydrates. We've got amylase in our saliva to break down carbohydrates right at the get-go. We're supposed to be eating carbohydrates. Carbohydrates drive just about every cell. So every cell in our body has mitochondria. And there's a process called the Krebs cycle that works through the cytoplasm and the mitochondria to create energy. Sugar is a big component that drives into there. Fat does too, but sugar is a big component that drives in there to get that energy. We're supposed to get sugar into the cell and into this energy complex. If we can't get the sugar in the cell, that's the problem. So how do we get sugar in the cell? We have an insulin receptor. When you eat sugar, the body creates insulin. The insulin goes to the insulin receptor. It opens up the door for the sugar to get into the body. If you eat a lot of fat, specifically saturated fat, certain amino acids also, it can drive fat into the cell. If fat gets into the cell, it messes up the ability of the body, almost like the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. It blocks the mRNA transcription of that insulin receptor. So while the vaccine creates a protein, fat breaks your ability to make that protein receptor. And now there's no lock on the door that can be open to let the door open and let sugar into the cell. So now sugar builds up at the outside of the cell. The body has to secrete even more insulin because it's like, wow, there's a lot of sugar. I'm going to have to secrete even more insulin. Now your body's churning out insulin. It can't get the sugar into the cell. That high amount of insulin that's out there now actually causes your body to retain fat because insulin is a storage molecule. It says store this, store this. So now, not only do you have high sugar, but you have high insulin causing you to retain fat. So it's a vicious cycle. It gets even worse. That's what type 2 diabetes is. If you're eating a very low fat, high carbohydrate diet, you basically clean out the system. You start to get good insulin receptors. You don't get as much what's called intramicellular fat, and the system works smoother. So I can't stand it when people go on a keto diet and they say, well, my blood sugar dropped, therefore my diabetes went away. We know from randomized controlled trials that while your blood sugar drops, your insulin resistance gets worse. The NIH did a study where they put people in a hospital ward. They gave them a ketosis diet for 2 weeks. Their blood sugar dropped, but when they did a glucose tolerance test where they gave them sugar, their blood sugar went through the roof. They were less insulin sensitive than they were before, and that should be obvious. Now, of course, when they put them on the plant-based low-fat diet, their glucose tolerance test was completely normal. It normalized. So that's an important thing to note. I don't know if I could answer this question. So this is a question about being 16 weeks pregnant. All my lab results came back normal. I'm on a whole food plant-based diet. I'm not taking any supplements for pregnancy. Yeah, you should worry about no supplements. There are multiple plant-based doctors that are dealing with pregnancy. The American Dietetics Association, the Canadian Dietetic Association have come out with statements saying that a vegan diet is healthy through all phases of life, including pregnancy, but you got to do it well. We worry about neural tube development and omega-3 fatty acids. If you're vegan and you're not getting a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, maybe you're getting ALA, but maybe your body's not converting that to DHA, which is what is really important for the child's neural development. That could be a problem. I'm not saying it's definitely going to be a problem, but it could be a problem. So supplementing with omega-3 may be something that you need to do. You should be getting enough folate, but that's something you got to worry about. Zinc is an issue. You got to make sure you're getting enough zinc. Huge issue, iodine. Huge issue is iodine, because if you're not using iodinized salt, which I notice a lot of vegan people that are really into health don't use iodinized salt, you could be very low on iodine. A lot of the foods we eat that are good for us. Cruciferous vegetables are great for us. Tofu is great for us, but tofu and cruciferous vegetables do bind to iodine. And if you're not eating a lot of iodine, you could become iodine deficient. That's really bad for the baby. So yeah, I think all pregnant people ought to be taking a supplement, especially a vegan should be taking. I would just do a plant-based vegan vitamin and an omega-3, but that's not my specialty. You really need to speak with people that are special in that.